And welcome to the Barry Foster Show on YouTube, originating from the Ridge Floor Studios in the City of Charm, beautiful downtown Avon Park. I'd like to remind you, if you have any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions for our program, just put them in the comments below. Check out here our YouTube page each and every weekday, as we're going to try to put up a new program each and every weekday morning. And please, it would help if you would subscribe to our YouTube page and join our pages at The Barry Foster Show on Facebook and Instagram. It'd be very helpful. And now we are going to start accepting sponsorship. So you can send us a note at thebarryfostershow@gmail.com, and we'd be glad to have you as a sponsor. In fact, I may have one coming up in the very near future. In the studios this morning, John Larsen.
Good morning.
Good morning. John and I spent about an hour and a half last night at the Sebring City Council meeting, watching the Sebring City Council deal with yet the latest episode in their work on Harder Hall. And for the folks who are wondering, the last thing that they did about Harder Hall before they went on to other business, which was pretty short, I think, the City Council took no action on the item before them, but then took action to move that the staff be instructed to create a request for proposal. You'll hear it called an RFP, a request for proposal for the use of the golf course. We reached out to Mr. Blackmon, who gave us this statement. We are very thankful for the overwhelming show of support from the citizens and speakers begging the council for Harder Hall to be the forefront of world-class growth, creating jobs and a tax base in a thoughtful, heritage-minded manner. It was clear the immense majority of citizens deemed the project worthy. However, we must be realistic based on the statements and actions by the City Council. After last night's council meeting, we are examining all options for the hotel building and the 14 acres of land on Little Lake Jackson.
Yeah, I think they own the property at this point, right?
Yes, they do.
They own the property.
Yes, they do.
So they can make a decision.
They can do
whatever they want.
If they wanted to knock it down, I think they might have to get a demolition order. In fact, the previous owner had pulled a demolition order on the hotel, and it wouldn't be the first time. I remember, and I told this story earlier, that back when I first came to Sebring back in 1986, in the early days of them going through this, there was a fire chief that told me that I would probably be a witness to the largest controlled burn that I'd ever seen, that the idea was that they were going to burn down Harder Hall and use it as a lab to fight multi-story fires. And I told him, gee whiz, I hope that doesn't happen. And but this has been decades, this has been 30 years ago anyway, that happened, so give or take. So, because I don't want to identify the fire chief that told me that. It's just been a long time ago. But at any rate, that wouldn't be the first time they'd given that idea for that to occur.
Well, I would say that, I've never been to a city council meeting before in the city of Sebring, all right? That was my first time. But sitting there listening to what went back and forth between Mr. Blackmon, both Mr. Blackmons, the father and son, and the council, okay, it was pretty obvious right at the outset. You could get a tenor for the sentiment of the council. And you could almost sit there and say specifically, this is not going to end well for the Blackmons at this point. It was obvious that these council people were dead set against going forward for whatever reason. The thing that I don't understand, though, the Blackmons have been here for, close to 3 years, I believe, all right? Invested, as he said last night, millions of dollars to this point. The roof alone, I can't imagine what the roof alone has cost them. There was an article in the paper the other day. It showed the cranes that they had to bring in. These were massive high cranes in order to put the tile and the other stuff up on the roof in order to put it together and finish the roof. And I think the roof was probably the singular biggest thing, because the damage that it created, because the roof was in such disrepair, was costing additional large amounts of funds to rebuild the inside of the building from the water and other damage that occurred because the roof was so bad. So it was very disappointing for me to watch the tenor. You could see the first two people that spoke, the lady from Bumbeck, or whatever her name was, I can't remember, and the fellow on the end. I mean, they were very adamant that we're an obvious no. I don't think they wanted to hear
You could
anything.
read the
They
votes.
didn't want to hear anything at that
The
point.
guy who you heard first, the guy on the furthest right-hand side was Leonard Carlisle,
Right.
who was born in Sebring and
Right.
has grown up in Sebring. The gal is a girl by the name of Rebecca Kogelschatz, who came in, and as I remember, and I could be wrong, but as I remember, Terry Mendel decided not to run for re-election. Rebecca Kogelschatz filed to run for re-election. There was no opposition, so she's automatically went in.
But I mean, it was just, and I listened to Mr. Blackmon's presentation, and you could tell that he was anxious to get his point across, rightfully so, and so on. But it was also somewhat obvious that I don't think the 3 or 4 of them listened to almost anything he said. I don't think they were really interested in hearing what he had to say, and so on. It was obvious that they were an absolute no right at the outset, and that's what was disappointing.
If you were counting votes, it appeared that they made their mind up. It reminded me, there are times that you apply for a job, and the company has to put out the fact that the job is open, okay? And then they hire the boss's nephew, all right? They already know who they're going to hire, but they have to go through the motions.
Yep.
And so they had to have this hearing to give people a chance to kind of vent their, even I got up there because I've watched this since I arrived, and I moved to Florida in 1980, and it was my first race that I went in 1980, and I found out about Harder Hall, and I knew about Harder Hall, and so, and one of my great regrets, I was telling Sandra about this morning, is that in the early days, in the early 80s, I was a news director at WIPC in Lake Wales, and I was given an invitation to go to Harder Hall for a race party, but I was out there with my buddies. I didn't want to drive like all the way into Sebring and go to some stupid party where I didn't know anybody, and then drive all the way back. And it's one of the great regrets of my life is that I didn't go to that, because that would have been, if not the last, one of the last parties at Harder Hall. You know, so but I'd known about it. I watched when they auctioned off all the stuff out of Harder Hall, and they had really a whole bunch of. There's nightstands and filing cabinets and beds, and there were even some ping pong paddles from when the United States went to China and had the ping pong diplomacy. Remember, they had some of those out there, and I wasn't into collecting stuff. But it was an interesting auction. I've watched the council. The first guy that came in was a guy by the name of Avi Lemore, and he was going to do the project. He had money, and he hired a guy as his site engineer, a guy by the name of Gary Puckett. And Gary was really big into historic preservation, kind of like the Blackmons, and he worked his tail off, and they worked their tail off. But Lemore was flying in his private, he had a little Piper Cub or something like that, little private plane that he was in, and it crashed and it killed him. His wife came in. She was a nice lady, but she didn't have the vision. She didn't have the connections. She couldn't make it happen. And then they began to go through this series of people who were going to come in and do things, okay? It was going to be a 5-star hotel with a helipad. It was going to be an adult congregate living facility. For the folks who know what an ACLF is, my dad used to refer to it as the old folks' home, okay?
Right.
So, and they went in, and in order to make it profitable, they knocked down the servants' quarters. So they knocked that down. In fact, they found a giant beehive in there, and it took them a long time to get the bees out of this thing so they could do that job. Harder Hall they brought in this group out of Colorado, a guy by the name of Lowell Fricker was the guy who was on site, and they sold it off piece by piece. They sold off the housing part. They sold off the golf course. The Harder Hall had its own golf course, which, as many know now, has been rezoned to put homes on because they couldn't make a go of it. And one of the arguments always from the city was, well, gosh, the Harder Hall course is right across the street from us, and we just can't make any money. But they always had a thing where if we just had more carts, if we just had a new cart barn, if we just had some other amenities for our members, if we could get somebody in to help us get a membership drive going and get the members to come in to support the golf course. When I first came here, the Sebring Municipal Golf Course held an LPGA tournament, and in fact the LPGA tournament headquarters was in Sebring, and they moved out and they canceled the tournament here. They used to have a giant youth tournament here, and we heard from a lady last night, and we're kind of going to go through the meeting, but she said the course is in terrible shape now.
Right, and there again, the city owns the golf course, okay, and all the Blackmons wanted to do, from my understanding, is yes, I think initially they wanted to own the golf course, and that was it, and I think then it went to, we'll lease you the golf course. And that's where it seems to be today. In other words, they will lease the golf course to the Blackmon family as part of the resurrection of Harder Hall.
This is the thing that and part of the thing that I was just flummoxed about was that last night after this, there was no discussion. There was no discussion of how are we going to handle this? What are we going to do? How can we make this a doable thing? They all sort of agreed that, why gosh, Mr. Blackmon, we know that your RFP proposal, your proposal for the request would be far and above anything anybody else could do. We understand that. So then, I mean, do they have to go through the motions on this? And why didn't they do this sooner? Because, I didn't want to talk again. I didn't want to, I talked once, and I had no idea that they were going to do what they did. But I wanted to say, do you know who owns the Sebring International Raceway? I'll give you a hint. It ain't NASCAR. It's part of the Sebring Airport Industrial Park. And it is technically owned by the Sebring Airport Authority, which is technically part of the city of Sebring, okay?
Right.
So it's really owned, when you rattle down through everything, it's really owned by the city. And anything that they do on the grounds of the Sebring Raceway, any improvements they make, ultimately are owned by the city. The viewing mounds they put up, that's owned by the city. Improvements to the track, it's owned by the city. Any of the improvements they make are owned. I don't know if the hotel's owned by the city or not. I'll have to find that out. But it's a permanent facility built on leased grounds. And why they wouldn't say to the Blackmons, I'll tell you what, let us give you a 99-year lease. Let us give you a 49-year lease. Let's say for the next 50 years, for $1 a year, you can own that facility. And it's not, that happened right here in Avon Park when Avon Park was building up their airport industrial park, that they made a lease to the Wellcraft Marine to build boats out here at the airport. And for many years they built boats and they paid some pretty good money. In the waning days of this lease, the boating industry went away. The market for the boating industry went away, and they quit making boats there, and they started storing boats there. Then they started storing boat parts. Then it was the last stop before the landfill. They never took care of anything. There were literally trees growing out of the gutters, and the city council finally got unhappy with it, and they had a clause that either side could pull out, and after some work with the attorney, it took them a little bit, but they got out of it, and that's where Classic Caladiums is now, is in the old Wellclass. So the city of Sebring could, and I told them they can craft any kind of deal they want, but they didn't even talk about that, and I found it very distressing that they didn't even discuss what could be done and how could we help Mr. Blackmon.
Well, that's why I say you got a sense during the meeting, you got a sense that they really, I don't say they want, because a number of them said at times, we know that you're the people to do this. We know that. We know you're the people with the resources. You can make it happen. But at the same token, they didn't seem to offer anything in a way other than this RFP. That was the only thing that they brought up. They didn't sit and say, I know they said that Mr. Blackmon wanted a up and down vote last night, okay? But I'm sure that if they would have said, we would like to propose a 30-day cooling off period where we can sit down publicly or whatever and have a discussion about what the differences are and how we can settle these, because we do not want to lose you as an investor in the Harder Hall complex. Besides, the golf course, and he mentioned this last night, I think his dad brought it up, but we know there's a water retention problem on the golf course.
Yes.
We're willing to build some retention ponds on the golf course to make water holes, if you will, which
Water hazards.
almost every golf course has
Yeah.
water hazards, okay? Most golfers hate them, but they have them, okay? Because invariably your ball ends up in the water,
Yes,
all right?
yes.
And so on. So they addressed the fact that they were going to upgrade the golf course, and surely they're not going to spend, like he said last night, upwards of $40 million to resurrect the hotel complex and not upgrade the golf course at the same time.
That's right.
They go hand in hand together.
And I'll tell you that apparently James Blackmon, who is Blackmon the Elder, begin to refer him that way. Robert Blackmon is the younger guy. He's like the age of our kids, and James is more our age.
He's got white hair.
He's got white
His son
hair.
hair is black hair.
Yeah, he's got hair the color of the almond blossom.
Yes.
So at any rate, he came up and he said we had come up with a deal to deal with the water, which would have involved the dirt road, and for the people around here who know where he's talking about, the dirt road that runs against the fire department, but the city wouldn't go for it. He said, I guess you viewed it as a land grab, okay? But one thing they did say, and I absolutely understand this because I have watched many parallel situations. They said, we want you to be in charge of the drainage. And they all bowed up like, oh, us? Why do we have to? He says, because you're a city, okay? You're the city. And you can deal with the Southwest Florida Water Management District much more easily than we as private citizens can deal with it. And what they were saying in code, I think, was we know if you ask Swift Mud for something, they'll probably do it. But if we ask Swift Mud for something, the heck with you. I think that was in kind of in code what they were saying, and it's right. I have seen people struggle. I've seen people struggle with the Southwest Florida Water Management District over drainage issues, and that's what this is all about. And in fact, they want to dig, like you say, the retention ponds and call them water hazards, which may or may not have water in them. As you know, sometimes there are retention ponds around here. There's a retention pond out in Rotary Park off Lake Jackson that has no water in it right now. Okay?
I have a large retention pond behind my house. And yes, during this time of year, plenty of water, 5 feet deep.
Yep.
In the no rain season, which is after hurricane season, it'll go bone dry.
Yeah.
It'll be bone dry for 3 or 4 months, and then the rain will come.
And they want to use that property, that land that they to level out the rest of the course and help deal with the drainage issues. They were very forthcoming in the things that they wanted to do. And as you pointed out, and by the way, if you haven't seen their Facebook page, it's called The Historic Harder Hall. And they were talking, I just lost it here. If you go and look, you were talking about the cranes. According to this post, there are 3 lifts on site, 2 with a 65-foot reach, 1 with a 60,000-pound, 135-foot lift. They are used by roofers, framers, windows openings, concrete framing, and window installation. And it shows, the work that they have been and continue to do out there. It shows some of the interior work that they've been doing, and in fact, even to the depth of the windows. Right now, they're working on the colonnades, which are those kind of arched walkways that they have. They want to make it into a prestigious, and I know you've got a good history of the Harder Hall here. They want to make it into a prestigious location. And even from its beginning, the idea, I think, was to have a nice little place for the rich and famous to go that were out of the way.
Yep.
That they didn't have to deal with Miami or Boca Raton. They didn't have to deal with St. Petersburg or Naples. They had to deal with all that stuff. They were out here kind of in the middle of nowhere, with all due respect, and they could have, one of the famous stories was these guys wanted to get away from Miami, and they were down in Miami, and they said, well, there's that Harder Hall's up there in sea. So they came up here, and this is in the 50s, okay? And they were at the little bar, but they didn't have, the girls wanted to hear some entertainment. So the guy gets on the phone, and he calls his buddy, who's a promoter down in Miami. Well, the Ink Spots are playing. He says, send the Ink Spots up here. So this real famous quartet, this pop quartet,
Yep.
they get in their car, and they drive up to Sebring and put on a show at the Harder Hall because these guys' wives wanted, and so they shelled out the money for it. So this is, I think, the original idea of Harder Hall, and it was sad that it kind of fell into such disrepair.
Well, one of the comments out of the history of this, it says, these extremely wealthy patrons even brought their own servants with them, and the hotel offered safe boxes for their cash and belongings. This was according to Jim Pollard, who we knew Jim Pollard from the Historical Society.
Absolutely.
And so on. So it was kind of interesting. But the one big question I have today, after trying to absorb this last night, how much money has the city of Sebring spent on the golf course and the hotel ever since it closed? I'll bet you it is in the millions.
Oh, sure.
Many times over.
Absolutely.
Many, either legal fees, other up and down, an offer which fell through
They
the
bought the hotel. They bought the hotel and was trying to sell it. I mean,
Yep.
and they sold it off. I mean, and they didn't make any money when they sold it off.
No.
You
But
know?
I mean, how much money has the city of Sebring? And if I'm a taxpayer in the city of Sebring, I have to sit there and question, listen, you tell me that so far the history of the Harder Hall and the golf course, you all, the city, has spent, pick a number, $10 million.
Easily.
And maybe more, maybe double that. And now you've got someone who's putting their money into it, upwards, as he said last night, $40 million. And you're going to let this go away because you can't come to an agreement with this Blackmon family? It just makes no sense, financial sense at all. None.
Well, according to Robert Blackmon, when they came in and took over Harder Hall, they paid $150,000 in back taxes right off the top.
Right. Right.
Just to be able to have it. And he says he talked about all the stuff that he'd done, and he said, "quote Why are we being penalized for our good works?" And I'm sure that's the way they feel. And not only have the Blackmons spent money here, but they have used a lot of local subcontractors to do work. We go to a church with a guy who was part of the crew that took out the motor for the elevator and cut it up. And he was there talking about how many local people have been making money off this refurbishing that's going on. The money is coming back in to the community. And again, I can understand them not wanting to sell it, but I can tell you, in the past, they said, well, it has what they call a reverter clause. If it's used for something other than recreation, then they are going to it has to revert back to the Wilsons' descendants. Well, that came up one time before when they were going to try to sell off Max Long Field, and Mike Swain, who was their current attorney, is Bobby Swain, Robert Swain. That's his kid. Okay, Mike said at that time we would have a horrible time trying to find the ancestors of the progeny of these people who donated the land to give it back to them. I'm not sure we could find them to give the property back. So that I understand it, and I'll tell you who I saw there last night. And it didn't occur to me at the time. It occurred to me this morning over coffee. But Casey Wohl-Hart, who is the tourism and development consultant. Mm-hmm. She doesn't work for the county. She's a consultant, and consultants get paid a lot more money than county employees. Anyway, she was there, and they have put out a plan that would do away with that golf course and turn it into a recreational complex with pickleball courts and all kinds of other stuff that's not a golf course, okay? and she was there to see what happens. And I personally think, my own personal opinion is they were rubbing their hands together because they got big eyes for that and things that they want to do, so they can bring in pickleball tournaments, which is the fidget spinner of sports. It'll be around for a while, then it'll disappear. It's like putt-putt golf,
Right.
It was around for a while, and then it'll disappear. But at any rate, I think that they were there to see that, because one of the RFPs for that golf course will be from either the Tourism Development Council or somebody that they know. Somebody that they think, they can come in and do this and turn this into something totally different. And they are going to be, not everybody plays golf, but we have so many other things here. We have pickleball and a splash pad. I don't want to. I saw the thing at one time, what they wanted to do, which I thought was I thought personally, my own personal opinion is, I thought it was an abomination. But at any rate, they were there, and that may be some of the hard no. That may be a promise that was made to somebody, said, you can do things other than a golf course there.
Well, the other thing, I read about 2 years ago, I read a story about golf, and it said that at that point in time, that there were 10 million less rounds of golf being played in this country than there were in years past. Because golf, like bowling, when I was growing up, bowling was the kingpin of the sport. I bowled all the time.
My dad was the captain of the team.
I loved bowling, all right, especially the fifth frame was beer frame. I loved that, okay? whoever got the best shot in the fifth frame, they got the beer. But anyhow, so golf has really, like bowling, has kind of dropped off in favor of younger, different kind of sports. Like you say, pickleball is the rage of the age today. Everybody's building pickleball courts. 10 years from now, there'll be some other sport that'll come along that will replace pickleball. Because eventually, and I know folks that we have a pickleball court in Tanglewood, have had it for maybe 7-8 years. I know a bunch of my friends played pickleball at the outset. But then they found as years went by, the legs and the muscles just weren't up to pickleball.
Right.
All right. And then they got out of pickleball. So now they play something like petanque, where you throw a ball and you see who gets the closest to. It's like the beanbag toss. But it's with a round ball and so on. So it depends on, and this area here is made up primarily of senior citizens. Let's face it. And somebody mentioned that last night. This is a senior citizen Highlands County. It
Absolutely.
is. And so on. So
and will remain that.
You have to have things that are going to appeal to senior citizens and so on. But it just didn't appear like there was a lot into it last night in the way of the city council being interested in sticking with what's done. And I don't know how you could face a father and a son that have come into town for the last 3 years, invested millions of dollars, time and energy, and now, after all that period of time and all that money they've spent, you're literally saying to them, if you don't conform to this, if you can't agree to this, then we don't want you.
I've seen people by municipal governments, not necessarily in Highlands County. I've seen them held over a barrel by people who have the ability to say yes or no. And the thing is that they really have, I think, damaged their reputation in leading. He feels like he was led to believe this is not going to be a problem. And now all of a sudden it's a big problem. But this is not going to be a problem. And to get back to our earlier conversation, I certainly see people wanting to come out to Sebring, have a little confab, play some golf, make some deals, kind of out of the way. People don't necessarily know that they're there. They may not even recognize who I lived in Lake Wales for a while, and when I lived in Lake Wales, there was a little place called Al's Place. Well, up the road from Al's Place was a place called Mountain Lake Estates. Now, Mountain Lake Estates is right on the grounds of Bach Tower Gardens, and it is a lot of big mansions. It is a true gated community. If you get in there, they want they have their own security force to figure out who you are, why you're there. They check you at the gate coming in. They check you at the gate going out, okay? This is a big deal. And so we were in Al's Place, and the bar is in a U shape where you can sit and have political discussions, whatever other kind of discussions you want to have, drinking beer and just shooting the breeze. And so this guy's in there, and we're sitting there, and he's in a work shirt and dungarees, and we're talking. He's got this old pickup truck, and he leaves, and Al goes, "You know who that was, don't you?" I said, "I got no clue who he was. Some guy." He says, "He's the president of Dunlop Tires."
Wow.
But he wants to come down here and be a mensch, a regular guy, So he comes down here, and nobody asked him how, about stock prices and stuff like that. They're talking about fishing. They're talking about the ball game.
Well, young Mr. Blackmon last night stated a couple of times, look, he said, I've got 4 or 5 billionaire friends,
Yes.
all right, that have come to Sebring, and I've promoted Sebring to them and say, look, here's some opportunities for you to come into this community and do whatever you do, and yes, make some money, but create something for the city of Sebring and Highlands County. So if you think that when he goes away that those opportunities are not going to go away, they're going to be gone.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that I think he stated it last night. He said, look, if this deal doesn't continue to go forward, he said, I will not have much good to say about the city of Sebring.
Well, back in the olden days, when I was a news director for the local radio station, I would invite some news sources to meet me at the at the time it was the Chateau Elan. It's now Sebring, the Raceway Hotel. It's the restaurant run by Reinhard Abner is called the Apex, and we'd go out there and we'd talk news and we talk things that are going on in Sebring. We were surrounded by race teams who couldn't care less about what was happening in the city of Sebring.
Right.
And so we were able to kind of talk freely and not be overheard. If I was down here at Dutcher's in Avon Park, or if I was down at the Three Gens in Sebring or some other place, you might think that somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, somebody's brother-in-law would hear us talk and say, I heard Barry Foster talking. This guy was spilling the beans, But out there at the hotel, nobody cared.
Right.
I would say that if people wanted to meet at a Harder Hall, kind of an out-of-the-way place, they could sit down, they could make some billion-dollar deals out there on the back of a napkin someplace, making a deal, staying at this little hotel for a few days. Nobody knew where they could get. Now they can get them on the cell phones.
Right.
Used to be that when they could just drop out of sight. No, when Kissinger went to China, they said he was sick, and so he just kind of dropped out of sight for a week. And so now they can get you on the phone. They can't tell where you are on the phone, but they can get you on the phone.
Well, they can also tell you where you're at.
Yeah.
Your phone is a mobile GPS.
And you just shut your phone off and leave it when you go.
Right.
But at any rate, they could come and do that. And this is a unique opportunity. Now, there's another very similar opportunity up in Lake Wales, Florida, which is the Wales-built hotel. And they have had the same kinds of problems with that facility that the Sebring City Council has had with Harder Hall. Sadly, the Wales-built is in the crown jewel of the ridge. There's no nearby golf course. There's no space other than maybe if you want to buy some lots and put a putt-putt course up. There's no golf course there, But it's a beautiful hotel. I think it's 7 or 8 stories tall. Back when I first moved to Florida, it was opened by this religious group called the Agape Players, and you had to pay to be in the Agape Players, and then you had to volunteer to work as a servant, to be a desk clerk, to be housekeeping, whatever. And my mom would stay up there all the time. It was a wonder, and they'd put on shows. It was a wonderful thing. One day they just disappeared. They said, there's great sin in the organization. And for them, great sin covered a lot of territory. It could have been anything. Could have been sex, drugs, rock and roll, money, who knows what. But they all disappeared. And since that time, it's just been empty. And they've been trying. They thought was a great suitor. He started. They had some kind of problem. The suitor left, and it's empty again. And so but there are these. Every small town has a hotel like this. In fact, there's one up in Haines City that was the great Grand Hotel. It's been taken over by the Landmark Baptist Church and is a a dormitory and classroom facilities for their college that they have up there. All right, but as a religious institution, I don't think they pay a dime in taxes. All right, they may pay taxes for the utilities. I don't know. I don't know the financials there, but here you have a chance. And somebody last night, and they misspoke. I understood what they meant. They said, for years, I've wanted to get a golf course off the tax rolls. What he meant was he wanted to get it out of city possession and on to the tax rolls.
Right.
Now, I don't know how that works, whether they would have to pay what they call a pilot, which is a payment in lieu of taxes, if they got a lease on this golf course, and they said, we're going to have you pay a pilot of $100,000 a year. I mean, pick a number. I don't know a number. They might do that. But, again, I come back to this because they all seem to already know. There was no, even for us, even for the public, to say, well, we've talked about this and we've talked about that. And because they can't meet in private. When you were in management, you could go in with labor, sit down, lock the doors, and you could say any horrible things to each other you wanted to say.
And we did.
And nobody would know.
No.
But here, if those 5 members of the city council want to get together, they have to do it in public. And there are certain times that they can get together in private, like a union negotiations, for instance. It's called a shade session. But even after the shade session, a month later, they have to put out the transcript of what was said. So they can't do anything, quote unquote, in private. So they have to measure their words. Otherwise, well, it won't be on the radio, but it'll certainly be on the paper. It might be in a podcast, for what they said. So they have to measure their words very closely.
Well, like I said, it was obvious last night that the tenor of the meeting was almost set at the outset when the first 2 people on the right-hand side literally said no. They said, no, we're not in favor of going forward, and so on. And then as their further discussion goes, the next 4 or 5 members down there, 2 of them, Mr. Shoup, I think it is.
Yeah, John Shoup's the mayor. Sadly,
right.
He has no vote.
Right, but I mean, the other 2 on the far end seem to be yes votes.
That would be Roland Bishop, who was in favor of it. Okay.
Right. Yep.
And then you had Harrison Havery.
Yeah, no vote.
Well, he said my no vote tonight doesn't mean no. It just means I want to do something else. And Josh Stewart also he seemed to be kind of conciliatory, but said he was not gonna vote for them to sell the course. Yeah. And so here's the thing. Leonard Carlisle was born in downtown Sebring and grew up in Sebring. I don't know Rebecca Kogelschatz's history, okay? Josh Stewart is Mark Stewart's son.
In fact, his father came up and made a statement last night.
Mark Stewart he and Madge owned the Kenilworth Lodge, okay? He owns Stewart Construction. He was a city council member for a while. So I'm gonna take a flyer and say Josh Stewart grew up in Sebring. Harrison Havery is Harry Havery's kid, okay? And he was born in Sebring, all right? Roland Bishop is he is some relation to Susie Bishop, and they're longtime residents. So Leonard Carlisle, Josh Stewart, Harrison Havery, and Roland Bishop grew up in Sebring. They've known about Harder Hall a long time. They probably, and Harrison maybe not so much, but I think the others were probably alive when it was actually opened and actually running. I know Leonard for sure was, and God love them. Harrison and Josh, Mr. Havery and Mr. Stewart, they're kids. They are young kids. God love them. They're trying to do the right thing, but they don't have the negotiation experience that you have, for instance. They haven't been through a lot of the stuff that more older Americans would have been through to be able to make this work, and that inexperience may be one of the reasons why they're at where they're at now.
Well, beyond public safety, which is the number one goal of every government organization, is public safety, number one. Number two is financial stability. In other words, how financially stable is the city of Sebring dealing with the Harder Hall and the golf course? I say to you and to everybody, how much money have they spent on this whole situation, the golf course and the thing? And if I'm a taxpayer, I'm going to say, if we had those $10 million back because, in fact, you did sell this off and it's now a functioning operation, and that's not what's going to happen. So we're on the hook for not only the money that we spent in the past. My concern is, could there be, if this thing doesn't come together and finish the way it was proposed and planned at the outset, would there be litigation against the city?
I don't know. I do know that Mr. Blackmon last night flatly stated, this is my last meeting on the subject. And he went through, he was at a big meeting, he was at a workshop, and I went to that workshop, and then he had this meeting, and he said kind of flatly, this is my last meeting. And I would, they were agreeing that the request for proposal, and I don't know if we talked about this on the air or off the air, but I realized that sometimes you have to do a certain process to make it at least appear fair, even though you know the outcome. Like, you probably have worked places, I know there are places that have, we have a job opening. We're accepting applications for the job opening, knowing all the time it's the boss's niece that's going to get this job. Unless some huge, miraculous, some great, New York-based guy who wants to work for nothing comes in, we're going to hire her. The niece is going to get, but we have to put on the performance that would say, well, we accepted all these applications and she's the most qualified.
Well, that was one thing that I was never faced with. I never had a boss come to me and say, John, hire that person. We were always allowed to interview, put out the proposal, interview, and then ultimately hire who we felt was right for the operation.
Well,
so that was a good thing.
Leonard Carlisle, Rebecca Kogelschatz, Josh Stewart, all three of them, I'm looking at my notes here, all three of them said basically the RFP, the request for proposal, is the way to go. And Harrison said he thanks the Blackmon family. He says, I'm excited about the opportunity. He says, we want to make sure we know what you're doing. He says, I'm excited. They talked about this, which I'm not sure what this is. He says, I'm excited about the Blue Sky RFP. There's a Blue Sky project, and I'm not sure what that was.
Yeah, that would seem to me like that was some kind of senior living situation downtown.
I don't know,
that was being proposed, I guess, by the Blackmons.
Since I left terrestrial radio, I have not kept up on local news as much as I did back in the olden days when they were making me a paycheck. He says, and Blackmon comes back. He says, look, you all said that we're probably going to get it, so why waste money and time on an RFP if we're going to get the bids? And that's when he talked about the 5 billionaires that he brought here and talked to them, saying, trying to get them involved. And somebody said that he'd posted something on his Facebook page, and he had trashed the city. He said, I didn't trash the city. He said there was a lot of people who came on, and we all know that social media is not always very kind. I know that was a surprise to people, but sometimes and I've had the problem where I put stuff up and they've gotten really ugly with me, and I am trying now to learn from Charlie Kirk and be Christian and gracious to those people and try to deal with them on a rational basis. Before I might have been short-tempered a little bit in my past life.
I don't post hardly anything on Facebook, but I do comment about a lot of things that I see on Facebook and whatnot, just because I feel like this person has said something either pro or con that I agree or disagree with, and I can't let it go without making a comment.
Right.
Always respectful. I never get really negative, but I do comment on a lot of things that are posted on Facebook.
I have, in more than one occasion, said to people who I know and people who I don't know, you and I are going to disagree on this, okay? And I realize there's some people, I'm just not going to change their minds, okay? So that's fine. That's fine. If that's what you want to believe, you can believe that. We continue at this point to live in a free country, but I'm not going to sign on to that. But as I read in the statement a little earlier, I'm going to read it again. Mr. Blackmon said that most of the comments were overwhelmingly in favor of them. People saying how they feel that the city pulled the rug out from under them. In fact, this local attorney, I think he's still an attorney, a guy by the name of Cliff Rhodes, came forward and asked the city attorney, Bobby Swain, he said, is a request for proposal legally required? And there was a little pause. He goes, well, no, it's not.
Right.
But then he said, well, that's good policy to do it that way. So it kind of says, well, yeah, John is your brother-in-law, and suddenly you're giving him a deal. You didn't give anybody else a chance to bid on this. So okay, fine. I reached out to Scott Natelick, who is the administrator, and I talked to the secretary there, and because I wanted to ask him who is going to put together this request for proposal. Mm-hmm. How is this going to be constructed? Whose job in this? And he's a busy guy. He's in a meeting this morning. They said that hopefully, I told him at 11 o'clock we were going to start a podcast. We started a little before 11. And I said if they want to reach out to me by text, they can. And I've got my mix minus phone plugger inner set up so that if they wanted to be on, they could be on. They said Scott asked me to tell you he's sorry he couldn't call or text. He's in a meeting. He says Bob Swain may try to reach out, but he also is in a meeting, and I get that. They're important folks. And Robert Blackmon, I have reached out to many times, and he just feels like I told him, I said, look, I'll just give you an open mic and let you talk and let you say whatever you want to say, but he didn't feel like that would be productive. What he did, he sent me and you'll probably see this in the newspaper, because this is the formal statement. You'll hear it without the Amtrak train coming by, okay? Yes. We love you too, okay? That looks like the 100-car freight. We're very thankful for the overwhelming show of support from the citizens and speakers begging the council for Harder Hall to be the forefront of world-class growth, creating jobs and a tax base in a thoughtful, heritage-minded manner. It was clear the immense majority of citizens deemed this project worthy. However, we must be realistic based on these statements and actions of City Council. After last night's council meeting, we are examining the options for the hotel building and the 13 acres on Little Lake Jackson. And that was his formal statement. And now, I love what they're doing. I understand the city wanted to protect itself because the city has gotten the muddy end of the stick on more than one occasion. The city has been stuck by people who came in with developers. And not only the city, I've seen the county get stuck by things. I've seen the city try to do things that they thought were helpful, and it turned to bite them on the rear end. Okay, I've seen that. I understand, and I understand, well, even with all their good works, how they want to make sure that everything's taken care of. But I don't understand why we got down to his last meeting before this all came to a head. I don't understand that.
Like I said, they've had 2+ years, I think close to 3 years, where the Blackmons have been involved either at the outset with the initial discussions to where we are today. After they've spent time, energy, and money, huge amounts of money, in resurrecting the complex out there. And now, after all of that, you would think, you can't tell me that you could have had this discussion with them 2 years ago at the outset? And if that would have been a no-goer, at least the Blackmons wouldn't have invested millions of dollars. They could have said, okay, if this is the way it's going to be, we can't live with that, so we're gone. But no, that's not the case.
At the end, I felt it got really cold there in the end, but Mr. Blackmon, Robert Blackmon, stood up and called it a very scary business climate. He said, I worry about spending another dime here. His father, James, may be a little more, and I'm sure that there have been phone calls back and forth, between city people and the Blackmons, whether they've taken it or not. You're an old NASCAR fan, and you remember when Dale Earnhardt would be in an accident, the first thing he would do is go and lock himself in the transporter. And the media wanted to talk to him, and they'd say, Dale's not coming out. Because he knew he might say something. He might say something he wished could unsay, but you can't unscramble eggs.
Right.
So I could see the Blackmons, and again, I understand Mr. Blackmon not wanting to come on, but his dad, James Blackmon, said that there are deed restrictions in the lease, and he said that the restaurant might be converted. He says right now the golf course is worth $0. He says we'll take care of the leases. He said, and he mentioned this mini storage facility they allowed to put in, which he thought was. I got from his comments he believed that it might be the slightest bit unattractive, and he was going to landscape around it so people wouldn't have to look at the leases. He says we could have solved the drainage problem on the dirt road near the fire station, but you told us no. And that's when he brought up the drainage ponds on the course, disguised as water hazards for the golfers. So it's a very sad situation. At this point, I don't know how much the city can offer an olive branch, because I think they feel blindsided and they feel disrespected, and they're in negative territory. You're going to have to do a lot just to bring it back to par.
Oh, I think so. I think it was obvious last night by the younger Mr. Blackmon. It was obvious last night that he was highly frustrated with where they are and what they've gone through. And I can't imagine if I personally had invested, pick a number, $4 million, $5 million in some project, and I've gone this long down the road, 2+ years down the road with this thing, and now you come along and say, like you said the other day, it's like Lucy and Charlie with football.
Yes.
Okay, at the last minute, Charlie, oh, don't worry, Charlie, I'll never do that to you.
I won't pull it out this time.
And
I promise.
Here he comes, and guess what? The ball's not there, okay?
And he does a midair flip and
That's
lands
right.
on his back.
So, it's so obvious that this was handled poorly, I think, by the city to let it go this far and let the Blackmons willingly, without any hesitation, you saying to them, well, before you invest all this money, really you should think about this. They didn't say that. Obviously, they didn't say that. Other Blackmons would have stopped a year and a half ago and said, time out. We're not going any further unless we get this thing squared away.
Well, when the Blackmons started, and I find this, they're going back the other way. When the Blackmons started this 3 or 4 years ago, there were 2 golf courses there. There was the Harder Hall course,
right,
and there was the municipal course.
Right.
Why they didn't buy the Harder Hall course, I don't know. Because here's the thing. Perhaps they thought, we're not going to buy the course, but we will lease it for the city, at a bargain price. We can get it, and we'll come in and we'll fix it up. So instead of paying, pick a number. I don't know what the golf course goes for. But instead of spending $1 million on the golf course and then spending another $10 million improving it, they can just go ahead and lease this course for virtually nothing, and then spend all this money fixing it up. And if you have a long-term lease, like a 99-year lease or a 50-year lease or a 25-year lease, banks want to know how long you're going to have this.
Right. Okay.
It says we have an ironclad contract with the city for 50 years. Okay. Well, 50 years. Okay. you can do this, make your money back in 50 years, and if things are going well, the city's going to go, okay, you just keep doing it, just keep giving us our pilot and our payment in lieu of taxes, and we'll go.
Well, the other thing last night, I saw the sign right there as you sit inside the door. It says seating capacity 87. My guess is there was well over 100 people there last
There were
night.
people standing along the
Yes,
walls, and
absolutely.
they didn't say a word.
Not many of them did, but so there was a lot of interest in what was being said, and I think the Blackmons were right. Probably about 90-some% of the people that came up and spoke at the podium were pro-Blackmons as far
I
as
would agree
wanting
with
to
that.
see this
I
project
didn't see
going forward.
any NA Blackmons at all.
No, well, there was a couple that made, kind of a comment about, their proposal or whatever.
They didn't want the city to sell the property, and okay, I get that. I get that.
Right.
But nobody said that these guys are charlatans, these guys are shysters. We didn't get any of that.
No.
In fact, when I got up there, I said, "This is the most people I've seen since they since they sold the Sebring Utilities Commission." And there were several former council members there. Dan Andrews was there. Scott was there. Terry Mendel was there. There were several.
Mr. Detman?
Tom Detman, the former chief too,
Yep.
was there. So there were people, and it's just a very sad state of affairs, and I'm so sorry it's come to this, and it's going to be interesting to see how they end up unpacking this.
Well, if this falls through at this point, I think the city of Sebring will have a permanent black eye.
Mm-hmm.
Permanent black eye, because this says to any other investors outside of the city, you better not come here, or if you come here, you better have an ironclad agreement before you spend penny one. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, like us, you're going to invest maybe millions of dollars only to have it pulled away from you at the last minute.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be, and it's right on Little Lake Jackson, which
Yes.
feeds into Lake Jackson.
Yes.
It's a wonderful piece of, in Sebring, certainly a wonderful piece of real estate. And I just, again, I'm going to keep reaching out to Mr. Blackmon, and hopefully sometime in the not too distant. And when you look at what happened to the Kenilworth Lodge, I did an interview with Manya Rahal about the Kenilworth Lodge, which still is vacant while he's trying to fix it up. Mm-hmm. The city of Sebring, he said, look, let me stay open while I put in the fire suppression equipment so I have a revenue stream. And they told him no. He said, well, I can't make any money. If I can't make any money, I won't have the money to do this. They said, that's too bad. So look at where the Kenilworth Lodge is.
Right.
And I give him credit. At least he's fixing up the outside. I haven't been inside. I'd like to get an inside tour. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, same thing happened to him. In my personal opinion, the same thing happened to the Santa Rosa Hotel.
Yep.
That they let it go until it was unsavable.
Right.
And now they've knocked it down. They're going to put condos in there.
Right. And the thing of it is, I did talk with somebody back when the Rahals were getting involved in that, and questioned about whether or not they had considered the Harder Hall complex. And they said, we looked at that, and it was so bad. It would have been such a huge investment money-wise, it wasn't in a ballpark for us.
Sandra and I, my dear friend Bob Hoffman, gave us a tour of that place the last day the city owned it, okay? And it is horrible inside. Mm-hmm. And when you look, if you go to the Historic Harder Hall Hotel on Facebook, you can see the work they've done. It is wonderful. It is, and there's no small amount of money invested there. And so I don't know. It's going to be. I don't have a dog in this fight anymore. I used to live in Sebring. I sold my house. I don't live there anymore. They can do what they want, and Lord knows they will. So, but I would love to see this place restored to its former grandeur. But it looks like there's a very large speed bump they've hit.
Yeah, it sure does. And obviously the Blackmons have the wherewithal to, I won't say walk away from this, but maybe turn around and try and sell it to someone else. And whether or not they have the resources that the Blackmons have to follow through on it, whether they have the will. And if someone comes in, let's say the Blackmons put it up for sale, and they start interviewing prospective buyers, And now they're going to come in and say, why, you've invested this much, why are you stopping at this
they'll
point?
know.
Oh,
They'll-
yeah. Well,
they'll
yeah,
know.
why are you stopping at this point? When they hear that story, if I was an investor, I would say, unless I have an iron contract before I sign on the bottom line, I'm going nowhere with this.
Yeah.
Nowhere.
Well-
and so on. So that's the downside of what the city, and the other thing is, let's say that when they got that finished, between the golf course and the hotel, they employed, 75, 100 people. You got to take that 75 to 100 jobs in the city of Sebring, whether you're a groundskeeper, a housemaid, a chef, a bartender, whatever you do, all right? Those are meaningful jobs. And as long as that facility is there operational, let's say from here until God knows how far down the road, those people are going to have a viable job, an income stream that then turns around and money gets spent in the city of Sebring.
That's right.
So, I mean, you're throwing away everything at this point, and you're going to continue to pay money to support a losing golf course, $100,000 a year from what we heard last night, okay? You're going to continue to throw that $100,000 away, the tax money from the hotel, the money from the employees that would work at the hotel, and the money that's paid for the utilities and for everything else that goes on, all right? So it just is a lose-lose, I think, for the city.
Not to mention the people who would stay at the hotel,
Absolutely.
who would buy gasoline at the gas stations, who would pay the tourist tax, who would eat at our restaurants, who would go to our stores, all the things that we're told that tourists do when they come here. That is a multiplier effect of money that's going to be lost not only in Sebring but in all of Highlands County.
Can you imagine how many people would stay at that place during race week?
I always said, oh yeah, it'd be packed.
Yes,
and
yes.
I always said that I told Mr. Ray Hall, and I also told Mr. Blackmon, I said, look, when you reopen up, Sandra and I want a room. We want to book a room.
Right.
Right. When they opened up the Chateau Alon, I didn't get a room, but when they refurbished it, when the new group came in and refurbished it, we booked a room. And in fact, Sandra gave me a combination birthday and Christmas present, and we booked a room overlooking Turn 7, which is her favorite turn.
Right. Yep.
So we booked a room there to enjoy New Year's Eve, and we went to the New Year's Eve party and did
Right.
and it was fun. It was a good time.
Yeah.
And by the way, coming up, I've done an interview with Ford Haycock III. Coming up this New Year's Eve at 3 o'clock on December the 31st, we will officially have had 75 years of racing at Sebring. That will be the 75th anniversary of the Sam Collier Memorial, and we booked a room. I booked a room last year, and I was told that I couldn't book it more than 6 months in advance, but I've known Reinhardt a long time. I said, Reinhardt, you can do anything. He goes, for you, I will do this thing. So since last year, we've had a room booked for New Year's Eve at the hotel up there. But I've told both Mr. Ray Hall at the Kenilworth and Mr. Blackmon at the Harder Hall, when you open, and this is when arguably we thought it was going to be a hotel.
Right.
We would, we would like to stay there.
Right. It was something I didn't, and I don't know, maybe it's common knowledge, but I didn't know it. But in looking at the history of this, all right, that, Mr. Hall filed bankruptcy, and he sold out, okay? Mm-hmm. And it was taken over by a man named Charles Thompson, who actually completed Harder Hall and a harder design for chandeliers and gingerbread trimming for the tower. Thompson was a Quaker and disapproved of such rich trappings. An article from the former Sebring News stated, when the hotel opened, each room was equipped with a Bell telephone. Amazing, okay? Bell telephone. Think of that. And a hotel offered numerous amenities such as a barbershop, a hairdresser, newsstand, gift shop, a resident nurse, and public stenographer. The latch string of Harder Hall, a promotional booklet for hotel guests, stated, guests were taken to church on group outings, okay? They were kept informed of the latest recreational opportunities by a daily newsletter published by Harder Hall and called the Harder Hall Herald.
Oh, really?
Okay.
I didn't know this.
Patrons were offered fine dining and a luxurious atmosphere, but alcohol was not available at Harder Hall, all right, until after the 18th Amendment was repealed. According to the latch string of Harder Hall, the hotel stood squarely upon their duty to recognize and enforce the law. Okay, so there you go.
How cool is that?
Yes, I mean, when you look at it, you read the history about it, you say, oh my gosh, that's really something, all right? You couldn't see that kind of thing today, but to say that each room was equipped with a Bell telephone.
Oh, that was, when Sebring first started, they had to have a certain number of telephones to justify them having a telephone service in the city. So to get the last number of telephones they had 5 phones hung on trees on the circle in downtown Sebring, so that they would end up with I don't know how many. I think it was 100. So they got 95. So they bought 5 more phones and hung them on trees on the circle, so that they would have so they could have phone service.
It reminds me of the Amish, where they have like one house in, let's say, a quarter mile will have a phone booth, a literal phone booth that they build and put a phone in there for emergencies. But not every house or every person has a phone.
No.
They have a
In case they have to call the doctor?
booth, in case they have to call the fire department, the doctor, police, for whatever reason. So they still practice that format, if you will, today, a large part of them.
And I think and the thing is these old hotels are made in a different form than we have today. In those days, the only thing you really did in your room was either sleep or get dressed. You get dressed, you go upstairs to get dressed for dinner, you go upstairs to get dressed to go out and play golf or whatever it is. But you did, the most of the time you spent was in the great room meeting the other hotel guests. Mm-hmm. You can see that at the Kenilworth Lodge. You have a giant great room, and that's because they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have TVs, they probably didn't really have radios for that matter, but because most of their entertainment was to go out and be where they were going to be, which was in Sebring, playing golf, swimming, tennis, whatever they were going to do. And so the rooms are very small because they really weren't made for they weren't made to hang out at your room. And so that's why people say the old hotels don't come back, because they don't have the same. Now, you want a nice big room where you can hang out in your room, watch TV, work on your cell phone, have a little computer base, all that kind of stuff, and whether he was going to, they had wired the Santa Rosa before they knocked it down. It was wired with fiber optics, so you could have computer service in your room, and you could do pretty much whatever you want. It was going to be a boutique hotel, and I think they'd had several offers that they let go, and I think, my own personal opinion was, there were people who wanted to let it go till it couldn't be restored so they could knock it down and do something else with it. And there may be people now, even today, who just as soon the Harder Hall would go away and they could put something up. In fact, the portion of ground where the inn on the lake sits, that used to belong to Harder Hall.
Okay.
And they sold that off, and they built another hotel there. So that was part of what Lowell Fricker cut up, and I was not the happiest guy in Sebring when they did it, but I didn't have anything to say about it. I said, gosh, I wish you wouldn't do this. As well, it's the only way. It was what at the time they would call it a corporate raider. Corporate raider would come in, take over a company, sell off the pieces of it, and make some money and disappear. And if your dad lost his job, well, he'll get a job someplace else. They'll learn how to code. Isn't that what they thought? Learn how to code.
That's what Nancy Pelosi said, or I think Bernie Sanders, one of
those guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's going to be. We're going to keep on this, just like we're going to keep on. I'm going to call Mr. Ray Hall and find out. I think that's going to be our next step. I'm going to call Mr. Ray Hall and find out, in light of this, what's going on with the Kenilworth Lodge. I think that's the next step.
Right. I think his current standoff, though, is not. I don't think it's with the city as much as it's with one of the former owners.
That's right.
Owners.
There is a lawsuit. You're exactly right. There's a lawsuit going on with some of the former owners. I may call him anyway and find out what the.
Sure.
Because I still see work going on the outside, and of course, to maintain the building, you got to seal it. The
Yeah.
walls have got to be good. The roof's got to be good.
And I think
you know.
they've replaced a number, if not all, of the windows at that Kenilworth.
Yeah, they would be
because
too.
that was one of the things he talked about initially, which was the same thing that one of the things that Mr. Blackmon mentioned last night. Yes, one of the developers along the way had replaced most all the windows at the Pink Lady, but he said those windows weren't artistically correct for the time frame. So he was replacing all of the windows with the correct time frame windows.
And he did point out with a smile, they have been on him even to the depth of the window.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he said that the things that we are been doing are historically and correct. He says other things were done. He didn't say this. I will say this. Other things were done on the cheap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to get it done.
Right.
You know, and so.
He's trying to correct those issues and trying to put it back the way they believe it should have been and looked like when it was built originally.
Yes.
So.
As we wind this up here, anything else?
Well, there's a lot. Like I said, there was a lot to talk about the history, which I had no idea the history of it. But when you look through it though and read about it, I mean, Harder Hall has spacious Royal Palm dining room, also offered for dancing. Guests could enjoy live music and after-dinner cocktails in the tropical lounge, an area added after the Prohibition was over. Okay, they conformed
They
a
knew it
lot
was
to
coming.
they conformed a lot to the Prohibition and the deals they had to put up with during that time.
Well, this was a very moral community. I mean,
Yeah.
this was very Bible-based, very church-based. I mean, as I understand it, I wasn't around to see it, but they were good as their word, you know, and they did. And I think that they looked at Harder Hall as this was 1927, was 20 years before any hint of a race out here at Sebring. So this big hotel was kind of their claim to fame.
Well,
you
didn't George Sebring, when he came to Sebring, and after a period of time, grant land to people to build churches? I think he
Yes,
did. That was
yes,
one
he
of the
did.
stories that I read, and I think Mr. Pollard talked about that when he discussed the history of Sebring.
And last night, Mr. Blackmon also talked about how the developers of Harder Hall were bailed out by the city with financial grants.
Yes.
And I will tell you this: after watching the property that has been given away by the Community Redevelopment Agency to people saying, "Here's a building for free. It's yours if you bring it up to code."
Right.
If you and I understand bringing a historic building up to code, it ain't cheap. Okay, I know. And if you look at what the Blackmons have been doing, they have not been cheap. Okay,
No.
but he says, you know, you've given all this stuff to other people, and now here we are. And he didn't say this. I'll say this. What are we, chopped liver? You know, because we're not getting nothing.
Well, that's the thing. Again, I go back to me, it comes down to numbers, all right? Everything needs to come down to numbers ultimately. And this thing is a losing proposition, as it was. Millions and millions and millions of dollars obviously have been spent by the city on the golf course and on the hotel. So this says if this deal doesn't go forward and drops at this point, you're going to then revert back to putting millions and millions of more dollars into it, trying to find the Blackmons will sell it to whoever they can sell it for if they decide to get out of it. But who's going to be there, and is the next owner going to really do anything with it, or are they going to come in and say, no, we're going to tear it down, and we're just going to sell off the property because it's more valuable than the building itself?
Well, you know, nothing that happens would surprise me.
No,
You know.
not at this point. I mean,
You
to
know.
see it get to this point like it was last night was really kind of a sorry thing to have to sit through and listen to, because I think the Blackmons were reaching out in earnest in trying to finish this project and put it together. Yes, was there something in it for them? But like he said last night, we're prepared and probably will spend upwards of $40 million. $40 million.
It reminded me of a guy who's been strung along by a girl, or a girl who's been strung along by a boy,
Right.
and said, and finally they're on this date, and said, she says, "Look, this is going to be my last date. Are we getting married or not? Because if we're not getting married, I'm moving on. If we are getting married, I better see a ring here within the next like 48 hours. I better see something here that says that. I better see some kind of. We should be going to the justice of the peace in the not too distant future.
Right.
And that's the kind of feel that I got last night. Was my mother used to use the expression "Fisher cut bait," and I think that because he said in his opening statement, "This is my last meeting," and I think now they want to try to prove him wrong. This is not his last meeting, but if you were counting votes, there were 3 possible votes there, because I think Roland Bishop was ready to go. I think that with certain concessions, both Harrison Havery and Josh Stewart would have gone. I think on the other side, I think that for whatever reason, it seemed like Leonard Carlisle and Rebecca Kogelschatz were resolute in being absolutely against it.
Right.
And it didn't look like there was anything. If you could read body language, you could see Leonard was leaning back from the mic, had his arms crossed. He was not receiving any of this.
No.
He wasn't buying it, as my dad used to say, he wasn't buying any of those bananas.
No, they did. Other than saying no, they really had an awful lot they didn't say.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so on. So they were adamant in their decision right at the outset. You could see that. And then as time went on, the other 2 or 3 down the line acquiesced to what they were saying and essentially said, no, we can't go forward unless we have this RFP thing in place.
At the end of the day, the last thing that happened, there was a motion made. Let me get my notes here. There was a motion made by Roland Bishop. He says, "I move we table the lease agreement to October 21st," and there was this dead silence.
No second.
And finally, they said, "There's no second." And there was another dead silence, and Bob Swain said, "That means that the offer that was given to us tonight at the city council, the thing," and I don't have it, I should have it in front of me, but I don't, but the offer by the city council, they're taking no action. And then someone said, I think, and then I'll give it to Josh Stewart, but I'm not sure. He says, "Let's have this. We'll direct the staff to create an RFP for the golf course," which is a request for proposal, which means like the Barry and John consortium comes in and says, "Hey, we'd like to take this golf course and turn it into the world's largest putt-putt golf course, and this is how we're going to do it." And the Blackmons say, no, we want to make this into a 5-star golf course. Someone who perhaps knows tourist-type people in Highlands County might say, we want to cut this up and make it up into a recreational complex, which has all different kinds of recreation and has virtually no golf at all. And the council can go over it and decide what they want.
Well, and the other thing is, knowing that the Blackmons appear to be willing to put in a tremendous amount of money to resurrect the hotel, don't think that they're not going to put a tremendous amount of money into resurrecting the golf course.
Oh my!
Because they want to sell that as a destination for golfers, amongst others. But golfers, we have this pristine, great 18-hole golf course you're able to play right across the street from the hotel. And so they'll probably even have a shuttle service back and forth.
Oh yes, that's part of the plan.
Or golf carts that you can pick up at the hotel and drive over to the golf course and play golf.
My understanding is that was part of the deal, that they were going to shuttle it over to the Caddy Shack, which I think may become a restaurant and something else somewhere along the line. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's part of the plan. And in fact, when Robert Blackmon pointed out how the city bailed them out, part of the deal was that the city would take their 9-hole golf course and make it into an 18-hole golf course, because they realized that people wanted to come and play golf and make deals. You know, I understand. I have seen other events where people come, they go to the races. They come, they watch, they do all the racing stuff, but they sit around, they make some deals. While they're there, they go to the motorhome, they make some deals. And so I can see this being a place where you're out of the way, can play some golf, have some fun, maybe play some tennis. There's tennis courts around, or whatever.
Pickleball.
Pickleball, and make some deals. So this is not our last program but this is by far, we've done 2 shows in one show. We're at an hour and 20 minutes right now. And by the way, before we quit, I do want to mention some friends of mine who've been very kind to us. So I want to mention the Strangely Warmed Coffee Roastery, which is in downtown Sebring, 180 steps off the Circle. I've done 2 shows with Steve Slaybaugh. You can look up here under Strangely Warmed Coffee, and they have a wonderful facility. He'll give you the 5-minute tour. They have wonderful coffee. It's coffee you don't want to miss out on. We drink the Peruvian blend, but there's many other blends. But if you go to strangelywarmedcoffee.com, I think is their website. But if you look up the Strangely Warmed Coffee Roastery Sebring, it'll all come up. Please buy some coffee online and tell them Barry sent you. Do you drink Strangely Warmed?
I know I did not.
Oh, I'm going to have to get you some.
I've cut back on my coffee consumption for some reason, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not against coffee. I just haven't consumed a lot of it lately.
I had some this morning, and it was just wonderful.
Is that right?
You've been listening to the latest edition of the Barry Foster Show, recorded at the Ridge Floor Studios in the City of Charm, beautiful downtown Avon Park. Any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions for the programs, topics you'd like to talk about, people you'd like us to interview, just put them in the comments below, and check out our YouTube page. We try to have a new program every day. We're going to have a great one on Friday coming up with my pastor, Joshua Goodwin. Please subscribe to our YouTube page and join our pages at The Barry Foster Show on Facebook and Instagram. And if you would like to advertise, drop us a line, thebarryfostershow@gmail.com. As we continue to look for truth, justice, and the American way, Barry Foster and John Larsen, and we'll see you next time.